Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Recovery Hour. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Recovery Hour here on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. It is our 32nd episode of this program where we talk all kinds of recovery, particularly addiction recovery and mental health issues. I am your host, Rod Pedersen, person in recovery, also recovery coach and interventionist. And as you see on the other side of the screen, our co-host, addictions counselor, and as you will learn in moments, a jack of all trades, Rand Teed, for the next hour. Rand, you truly are the magic man, and you have pulled a rabbit out of the hat here tonight for our viewing audience. And hey, our initial guest, I won't name her, but she had to beg off just moments before the show. She couldn't make it. And you have introduced a very special guest who will join us in the second segment. I'll let you tell our viewers about that.
Yeah, Richard Hoffman is going to join us. Richard's the director of the Chatsworth Treatment Center in Montreal. It's a very different approach to treatment. It's a very intense, small group, 6 people, 6 to 7 people maximum. Everybody starts on the same day, ends on the same day, and it's a intense 3-week program. Our friend Bob Marrier refers it to it as the university version of rehab.
Right. I've heard him say the corn-fed. I guess that means the best. But the one thing that I have heard, and you tell me if this is right or wrong about Chatsworth, is that it is for executives. Is that
not necessarily
true or no?
A lot of executives use it because they don't want to be away from their jobs that long. But it's also used by athletes and all sorts of people. I've had several medical professionals in there as well for a similar reason. It's fast, it's short term, it's like I said, really intense.
Do you hate this question that I'm going to pose to you anyways? And that is, what is its success rate? You must get that a lot when it comes to treatment centers, right?
To be honest, I don't know the exact statistics. I've had a number of people there who have done really well. So from personal experience, I would say that it's very good. I know they do a good job of keeping in touch with families. They do a good job of keeping in touch with referral agents. So you know what's going on with your people when they're there. Lots of good things.
Yeah, well, you understand what I'm saying. I think it'd be pretty hard to nail down any treatment center or any recovery institute on what their success rate is, and because it's very hard to nail down. And the one thing that bothers me when I hear about people out in society that so and so worked with this counselor, but it didn't work for her.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, I have a pretty good idea why that is. But I mean, that's a topic probably for another day.
Well, brings up an interesting point. The research around treatment success is almost exclusively on the individual's decision that they want to get better. If somebody really wants to figure out what's wrong and change it, then treatment centers give them a huge, beautiful toolkit that they can use. Sometimes when you go because you have to or you think you should, but are still hanging on to some of those older thoughts like, oh, I wish I could drink, or, well, I know I can't do cocaine and I can't do alcohol, but cannabis is okay. Or, switch those around in any combination that you want. All drugs do essentially the same thing, which is dysregulate our emotional response system, our reward system, our brain chemistry, and change how we are able to respond to things. So.
Right. Well, of course, the point of it all is I don't think it's the counselor or the treatment center that failed. It's the person that was hopefully trying to get sober. But again, that's a topic for another time. There were a couple topics that you wanted to discuss tonight. And one of our main topic was going to be recovery and or addiction and how it impacts a community or substance use disorder. But we'll push that to another time when that guest is available. One thing that I just sense is burning a hole in your pocket is the decriminalization of small amounts of illegal substances in certain provinces and jurisdictions across Canada. It's made news. I mean, I'm sitting here in South Florida, and I heard about it down here. Your thoughts on that? What's been in the news?
Well, it's been in the news a lot, and I know the New West recovery community has been pushing uh, that municipality to take a look at decriminalization in that area for 2 or 3 years now, and and essentially, I don't think it's a bad idea. I agree that people shouldn't go to jail for small quantities of a substance, and I think for the most part, most police departments aren't actively prosecuting people with personal use quantities of drugs. The the problem that I see though is how people are thinking that decriminalization is a magic solution to the much bigger problem of substance use disorders, addiction, alcoholism, whatever you want to call it. And what they're saying is, well, it worked in Portugal. Well, and it did. And Portugal did an amazing job of turning a really negative situation around. They had a really high rate of overdose deaths. They had a high rate of substance use problems affecting all parts of society, and they uh, did the first real definitive work on decriminalization. But they didn't just decriminalize it; they also medicalized it, meaning if somebody got in trouble with the the police or whatever uh, with substances, Portugal significantly expanded their treatment options. They built a number of new treatment centers. They staffed them. They trained the staff. And when somebody got into problem with having personal possession of drugs, instead of dealing with the justice system, they were offered the opportunity to go into treatment. They didn't have to. If they chose not to, then they would end up dealing with the courts. And they had almost instant access to detox and treatment. So there was no long-term wait. There was not a lot of red tape to deal with. And secondly, and I think this was a more important piece even, after treatment, they were given a job. There were a number of industries, companies, businesses that made arrangements with the government to hire people coming out of treatment centers, to train them, and the government paid part of their salary for the first year. Uh, that did a really beautiful job of getting people back engaged in society, and and we don't have that yet. And so the the push for decriminalization uh, is not necessarily a bad idea, but thinking that it's going to be a magic solution to everything uh, doesn't make sense given the infrastructure that we have at the moment to try and manage addiction problems. We don't have, like in Saskatchewan, for example, there's anywhere from a 4 week to 10 week wait to get into treatment. There's a 4 week to 6 week wait to get into some of the detox programs. A couple are a little bit quicker, a week to 2 weeks. But there's still that huge space in between where people don't really have an option of getting help until they get into treatment. And, we've had that problem for a while, that sort of lack of a continuous care model. Which exists for other medical problems. Like if you have a cancer issue, and that's diagnosed, there's a whole sequence of events that follows up with making sure that you have care, check-ins, all those kinds of things until you get the help you need. And if it involves chemo or if it involves surgery, then there's follow-up help after that. And and that's one of the things that we're really missing in dealing with substance problems is that continuum of care.
Well, that's a real Pandora's box. And for those, just to sum up what Rand was just saying, if you have cancer, you are whistled through the program. And trust me, I know through the system. My mother had it. I know it. If you are battling addiction, you are not hustled through anything. You have to wait. What did you say? 4 to 10 weeks or 8 to 10 weeks? What did you say it was?
It's about 6 to 10 weeks to get into
6 to 10.
treatment, and like Wacamo is sort of 4 to 6 or 6 to 8, depending on your gender. It's a longer wait for women right now than for men. Regina Detox and Larson House in Saskatoon are a little bit quicker, but they're also shorter programs, so the turnaround is a little bit faster there.
Well, a couple things jar my mind when you talk about that, and one is the disease model of addiction and substance use disorder. And I'll just tell you a little story as we sit here. Got to be good friends with a police officer in Fort Lauderdale who was part of a large sting rand for people that were in a pharmaceutical scam, opiates, and and put a lot of people in jail for using, stealing, and dealing pharmaceuticals and opiates. Just recently said to me, I'm kind of looking back, feeling bad. We put a lot of people away that are suffering from a disease.
Yeah.
Oh, well. You know what I mean?
Well,
I'm like, well, it's a little late now. But a lot of them were put away for trafficking, not use. You understand the
Yeah.
difference. But I mean, that right there, you feel for those people that are battling the disease of addiction.
And I think we do a reasonably good job of not incarcerating people just because they possess drugs. Sometimes it's because they were breaking and entering, stealing, those kinds of things. But one of the programs that we do have here that is really good is drug court. People who get into legal trouble because of drug use, as long as there hasn't been any violence or weapons. I think there's a couple of other little criteria, but essentially, sort of nonviolent related drug crimes are eligible to go through the drug court program, which is ongoing treatment, lots of check-ins, lots of encouragement to continue to be successful, lots of counseling, plus reintegration back into the community. And those, that's a really solid program. We've talked about us trying to create a similar program for impaired driving. We do have the Impaired Drivers Treatment Center, but that does involve, essentially going to jail for multiple impaired driving offenses. And so, a program that allowed people to, stay working or whatever they were doing, but be engaged in a long-term outpatient kind of treatment program that had some significant monitoring attached to it, so that you knew that they weren't using alcohol. Same with the drug court, there's very regular drug testing. And people that have gone through that successfully have really credited the care and compassion that they got going through that program.
We only have a couple minutes left in this segment. I will ask our viewers if you have questions or comments for Rand and I. You can fire them in now or save it for the very last segment where we do real-time talk with our viewers. But just with this decriminalization in certain jurisdictions of small amounts of, what is it? Cocaine, fentanyl,
Any
not
op-
heroin, is it?
Well, any opioid. Yeah, it could be heroin.
Okay.
Doesn't really matter what the drug is. There was a
Are they
limit of
using the
2.5 grams.
Are they using the exact Portugal model? Is that what they're following, or what are they saying about that?
Well, similar, but they don't have that second and third piece of immediate access to treatment. It's just you don't get in trouble, which is okay, but it doesn't really teach anybody anything. There's no
Right.
there's no either positive or negative consequence.
Right.
The
well, we can
positive
talk about
consequence would be going into a treatment program. Negative would be dealing with the courts.
Right, but first offense, I wouldn't think that they would probably do that. But I'm interested to hear what you and Richard have to say after this break, and the fact that we don't have a substance abuse problem, we have a trauma problem across this globe. Richard Hoffman, the director of Chatsworth Treatment Center in Montreal, will join us next. Get your questions and comments in, everybody. You're watching the Recovery Hour, episode number 32 tonight on Facebook Live and YouTube Live.
Are you affected by someone's drug use? Do you keep trying to make things better and nothing helps? Nar-Anon family groups are a worldwide fellowship for those affected by someone else's addiction. As a 12-step program, we offer help by sharing our experience, strength, and hope. For more information, contact nar-anon.org or call 1-800-477-6291. There is hope.
Welcome back to the Recovery Hour, everybody. Our 32nd episode. We are brought to you in part by SGI. Take care out there, and supported by Nar-Anon and Al-Anon. And our next guest is a longtime personal friend of our co-host, Rand Teed. So I will let you, Rand, do the introductions of Mr. Richard Hoffman. Can't wait.
Sure, thank you. Hi, Richard. How are you? Are you hearing me? Anyway, this fine gentleman that everyone is looking at while they figure out the audio is Richard Hoffman. He's the director of the Chatsworth Treatment Center in Montreal, as I mentioned before. And do we have Richard? I can't hear him.
They'll figure it out. Well, this is a common issue. So, you just keep talking, Richard, until you hear us.
And there he is. There
you go.
Okay. Hi, Richard. Richard, this is Rod.
Hi.
He's our professional host of this show. So thanks for joining us. So
I appreciate it.
do you want to tell us a little bit about Chatsworth?
Chatsworth is a treatment center, 3-week treatment center in Montreal. We were asked to reduce the length of our program back in 2003 to accommodate outpatient therapy. There's a group of professionals in Houston that asked us if we would design a 3-week program in order to be able to complement outpatient therapy by being the emotional surgery unit, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was a little skeptical about how it would work, but their view on it was that a lot of people do need the 90-day program, but a lot more people don't. And so we designed the 3-week program. What's unique about Chatsworth is a closed group program where everyone starts the same day and finishes the same day. We specialize in working with small groups, 6 people maximum, and we have 3 wonderful clinicians to handle those 6 people.
So lots of personalized attention.
Oh, very much so, very much so.
And not very much
Almost
down
daily
to,
individual counseling.
and not very much downtime as you find in some treatment centers. Like people are pretty busy there, from what I
Yes,
hear from
yes.
the fellows and gals that I send there. So
Yeah.
we were talking about decriminalization. Uh, what are
hmm
your views on that?
I I have a bit of a radical view on that, and that is, I think all drugs should be decriminalized. Simply because I don't think that market penetration will be any greater if the drugs are legal. As it is now, I don't know of anyone walking around saying I couldn't find any opioids or I couldn't find any weed.
No.
So the fact that they would be legal or decriminalized would take it out of the hands of criminality. It could be regulated, just like alcohol is,
Well, and
and the
cannabis is
taxation
now too.
revenue could help treatment centers.
Yeah, it could. And I think the other thing about it is it uh, allows us to look at it a little more humanely. It takes it out of the justice system, and it's
hmm
easier to get people thinking that this is a health issue, not a legal issue. So I think
Yeah.
that's pretty important. And what are your thoughts on harm reduction?
Well, harm reduction originally started not to help the addict in the least bit. Harm reduction was started in order to protect the pharmacies and the little ladies in their purses.
But do you think?
So what was established was a situation where a safe place was offered to the addicts and substitute drugs were offered to the addicts so that they wouldn't have to break into pharmacies and knock off little old ladies. Now, since then, I think that it has grown and evolved into being a situation where we can reach out to certain addicts, give them a safe place, and still be able to have a chance to introduce them to the ideas of recovery.
Yeah, I really like that piece of harm reduction. If it's a step in a process to move towards uh, better wellness, and I mean I'm an abstinence kind of guy. I mean you know that, but
hmm hmm
not everybody uh, needs to do that. I think there are some people that can manage some levels of substance use, uh, and maybe they'll decide that they don't want to. And I think harm reduction creates an opportunity for clinically trained people to help people look at the advantages of making some significant lifestyle changes, and hopefully moving into a level of recovery that brings them health and well-being.
it does have that possibility. And but I love what you just said, and that is that if there's trained professionals that can work within that framework, so that the addict is welcomed into the idea of recovery, even though they're still using.
And that brings up another issue that's always kind of right in our faces, is that stigma piece. Like a lot of people still are hanging on to a belief that if you have an addiction problem, somehow or another you're a bad person. So what do you do at Chatsworth to help people get past that?
Well, we of course try to really help them appreciate that it is a disorder, a disease.
Hmm.
So it's a multifaceted one. There's a physiological component to it, the brain chemistry.
Yeah,
Without it, you can't be an addict. We what we teach is that addiction doesn't live in the substance or the behavior. Alcohol is not addictive unless you're an alcoholic.
yeah,
And even opioids, one could say that they're not addictive unless you're an addict. Grandmas and grandpas all over Canada are getting hip and knee replacements, and the go-to medication for pain management is some form of opioid.
yeah,
And when the doctor tells Mrs. Smith that it's time to stop using, she says, "Oh, thank you. I didn't like the way it made me feel."
yeah. And then
But she doesn't go out in the streets trying to score some more drugs.
no,
So there's a physiological component to it, there's a spiritual component to it, and there's a psychological component to it. And when you're able to get that across to the person, for them to really appreciate that there's something fundamentally different between them and the normal person, if you wish, the non-addicted person, they realize that it's not a question of willpower, it's not a question of morality, it's not a question of whether you're a good person or a bad person. It's like telling someone we've diagnosed you for being ADD or ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
or diagnosing someone for diabetes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of helping people accept that, what sort of success rate do you have? Like, do you still have people that once they're done Chatsworth, they're still feeling like they're not like everybody else?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, because some of their feelings of being so different also comes from the guilt that they have of some of the behaviors that they've exhibited because of their addiction,
True.
right? Okay.
True. Yeah.
So it's not that I feel like I'm a bad person because I'm an alcoholic, but I feel like I'm a bad person because I did certain things because I was drunk. And there's that self forgiveness that needs to take place, and that's a process. And to come to be at peace with your past, right?
Yeah.
And all of these take a little bit of time. But as far as success in helping people appreciate that, yes, they do have a disorder, they are distinctly different from the other people, and that it's not a bad thing, I think we are successful in that.
Good. Well, like I said, I've had quite a few people through your program, and they come out feeling really good about themselves, and feeling like they learned a lot and accomplished a lot. So that, lots of credit to you and your team for creating that. The
Well,
other
thank you.
other piece that's sort of tied into this is the family. So what kind of things do you do to help the family start to work that forgiveness piece, and also understand that this is a disorder, not a bad person issue?
Well, there has to be that beginning of a healing process, and that healing process is going to take some time, and it has to be also supported by the person's demonstration that they're willing to be committed to recovery,
Yeah.
right? And that goes a long way, obviously. But the explanation of forgiveness, if you wish, as being just a free unconditional gift that you can give someone to free yourself of the resentments that you're hanging on to. So the healing process that needs to take place is learning to speak, learning to talk, learning to communicate, learning to be able to set boundaries, to regain a voice. So the families come to understand what codependency is about, what enabling is about, but also they come to understand that their pictures of the person that they sent us has to be updated
Yeah.
to allow the change, to allow the possibility of change to happen in that person. And so I think that when we're talking about family, one of the most important components is to help them be willing to update their pictures of this person that's in a transformational mode.
Good. Thank you. Um,
Yeah.
Rod, do you have any questions or comments? Or we maybe have lost Rod.
Watching you guys.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
there you are. There you
Hi.
are. Hi.
I've
Hey,
just been
Rod.
watching and enjoying you. Hey, how you doing, Richard? I've seen your interviews, the videos, and I enjoy them very much. And my questions for you, and thank you, Rand, for the opportunity, is your radical thoughts on decriminalizing all drugs and also on harm reduction. How do they go over in society and even within the recovery community?
Not that well. There's still a resistance, you know. But I don't push it. I'm not a militant in any way, and I'm willing to work within the framework that's presented to me. But I personally do believe that just like alcohol, that had to be taken out of the hands of the bootleggers and the you know the ones that are producing alcohol that's not in any way safe. Because when we talk about safe environments for addicts to use, we've designed safe environments for alcoholics. They're called bars,
Yeah, relatively safe.
and it's controlled, and the liquor that is sold is controlled, and it really it didn't reduce the amount of alcoholism,
No,
but it made it safer,
yeah.
right? Okay.
And
So from that perspective, I think that if society would come to appreciate that the addiction does not live in the heroin, the addiction doesn't live in the marijuana, addiction doesn't. Sara Lee chocolate cakes are not addictive unless you're an overeater.
yeah,
And Vegas poses no threat to you unless you're a compulsive gambler. So the addiction lives inside the person. And if you decriminalize the drugs and the activities, just like you've decriminalized gambling, and we have casinos all over the place, right? And compulsive gambling has not gone up just because we've opened casinos, right? And when you look at it from that angle, you say, well, decriminalizing would allow society to know that the opioids that are being sold are safe and regulated, taxed. The tax money could go towards supporting treatment for all the ones that are addicts, right? Okay. Just like, there should be a portion of the liquor money that should automatically be earmarked to support treatment centers, because not all drinkers are alcoholics, but those that are will only find out once they start drinking.
yeah.
And so they would need to have that support. That's what decriminalization would be able to do. And it would in no way, no one can prove to me that it would increase consumption. As a matter of fact,
Well,
there's study after study that says that once it's decriminalized, the consumption goes down, actually.
well, I'll tell you what. You've been around this business a lot longer than I've been with Rand lobbying the government on these types of issues. And Rand, I think you'd agree, our government in Saskatchewan is very open to hearing it and asking the questions. I'm wondering, and they've put the money back in, maybe not to the degree that I'd like to see, but it's coming. The Quebec government, Richard, have they, basically our issue is that you got people determining policy on substance abuse that don't know anything about addiction or substance
Yes.
abuse.
Yeah,
What's
I
the
mean
scene
that-
in Quebec that way?
And Quebec is really notorious for that. The people that run the licensing board for treatment centers and whatnot, bureaucrats that have never actually ran a treatment center, never actually worked in the field. Yeah, God bless them.
I know in
There's
Quebec.
so much I can say about criticizing our government. I have to be careful here.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I'm careful
I
with
don't
that
give
too.
them any high marks. That's for sure.
Quebec has done a good job of educating the public about alcohol. They've got that Edge Alcohol program, which has done a pretty good job of helping people become aware of limits and some of the problems related with overconsumption. So,
Yes, but they sort of remind me of these employee assistance programs companies that go in and get these big clients like the Royal Bank and Alcoa and whatnot, and they're basically cosmetic employee assistance programs.
yeah,
It's to be able to say we have one, but when you look at how much money is Quebec actually putting into detox centers, it's sad.
yeah.
When you take a look at how much money they're putting into treatment centers and supporting treatment centers, that's sad also. So putting out the publicity and putting out the wonderful educational program, yes, very good. But to back it up is where the decision has to be done as to how the healthcare system should be managed. And here in Quebec, our healthcare system is now due for its third or fourth major revamp because once again they've come to the conclusion that it just doesn't work.
I think
You know?
most health districts are figuring that out. Anyway, we got to cut to commercial here. Richard, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate the short notice call here, but
For you, Rand, always, I just want to say you are top-notch fella. Anything I can do to support you, you know, I love the work you do and I love you. You're a great
thank you.
person. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great meeting
Yeah.
you, Richard. Thanks for the time.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Richard Hoffman from Chatsworth.
Are you affected by someone's drug use? Do you keep trying to make things better and nothing helps? Nar-Anon family groups are a worldwide fellowship for those affected by someone else's addiction. As a 12-step program, we offer help by sharing our experience, strength, and hope. For more information, contact nar-anon.org or call 1-800-477-6291. There is hope.
Welcome back to the Recovery Hour, everybody. It is our final segment, but still plenty of time here as we go to the top of the hour. I would ask you to write in, especially if you're watching on Facebook Live, with your questions and comments. Perhaps Kira, our producer, can have them put on the screen, or the guys in the back room, the crew at IKS. And Kira, I'd ask you to text them to me if they come in and if they somehow slip by me. But I got a question for you, Rand, about Richard Hoffman and what a cool cat he is. I assume, well, obviously he's worked his way up from the pits of addiction to the director of the place.
Yeah.
He's got his elbows and hands dirty in the field doing the work. Is he hands-on now at Chatsworth, or how much do you know of his involvement with the client?
He does most of the lecturing there, most of the teaching. And I know there was a couple of questions that Kira texted to me. One was related to Chatsworth, and is it a 12-step based program? And he certainly teaches about the 12 steps so that people are able to understand their value in all sorts of different ways to look at them. So in essence, I guess the answer to that is yes. It just popped up there. It's not necessarily tied to the 12-step community, but they do teach the philosophy that's created with those 12-step programs. And then there was another question that Kira had texted to me back to our first segment about drug court and where in Saskatchewan are drug courts. And as far as I know, the only one is in Regina. It's been running for, I think, about 15 years now, and has pretty good success stats, considering the clients that they get are typically coming from lots of trauma, and you brought that up before, and that's a huge issue that I think people need to understand, that when individuals are dealing with trauma, they're essentially dealing with feeling stress all the time. And when we're feeling stress all the time, we are constantly trying to find a way to avoid feeling that. And one of the ways that lots of people use are substances or gambling or sex or whatever. So understanding that there is both large T and small t trauma associated with many substance use issues is pretty important.
I want to give a shout out to Jamie. He's watching in Nova Scotia right now, and he says the Stanley Cup playoffs have taken a back seat to watching us talk about recovery. You, sir, are going to have to explain the difference to me and our viewers, the difference between capital T trauma and lowercase t trauma.
Okay. So large T trauma are typically those things that we talk about in that adverse childhood experience piece. So sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, um, physical neglect, emotional neglect, lots of household dysfunction. So parent with a mental health problem, parent with a substance problem, police come into your house to attend to domestic issues, seeing domestic violence in your house, and contentious divorces. So, where there's lots of fighting, arguing, throwing dishes, that kind of stuff. Those are typically the large T trauma pieces. Small T trauma are can be things like quite a bit of bullying at school, having anxiety that isn't properly treated when you're young. It starts to develop into a trauma response. Being in a bad car accident can trigger, again, another type of anxiety. Some of the things that create PTSD almost fall into that smaller T trauma kinds of pieces. Emotional abuse from a partner. A lot of financial problems can become small T trauma, where you just don't feel safe. Essentially, trauma is about not feeling safe, and then our system goes into response mode, trying to figure out a way to make ourselves feel okay.
Thank you for the answer. And another one that came to mind with you speaking with Richard Hoffman from Chatsworth. So 21 days, you said?
Yeah, 3 weeks.
Is the
Well,
program?
3 full weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he addressed the topic of healing. And I mean, you're infinitely aware of my story and a lot of people's story, but I'm 7.5 years sober and still healing. I've just hit a new level dealing with the great people in my life. How are you going to even scratch the surface in 21 days? I assume they do.
Well,
How would you, how do they do that?
What they do there really is give you a significant level of understanding of the kinds of things that created your situation. There's lots of one-on-one therapy there. Sometimes twice a day, and so you get an awful lot of opportunity to talk about your past and start to identify things that need to get worked on. And they do a good job there of giving you a recovery plan to continue to use when you get out. And like we said when we started, much of it is about motivation. If you get to the point where I don't want to do this anymore, like a long time ago, I made a decision that no matter what, I wasn't going to go back to drug or alcohol use. And so that allowed me to understand that when something happened that I didn't like, I wasn't going to go back there. I was going to figure out a different way to work through that. And that's really what recovery is finding alternative ways to work through a situation. So the program at Chatsworth gives you a toolkit and also helps you identify areas to use that toolkit on. And as I said before, how to use those 12 steps, whether you're attached to meetings or not, but how to use self-reflection, how to use daily inventory, how to use um, self-forgiveness, making amends, those kinds of pieces that get rid of our stress that we've dragged along with us. Uh, they do a good job of putting those pieces together.
If there are any questions and comments and Kira wants to put them up on the screen, that would help us out a great deal. I was going to ask Richard this. He's gone. You will be able to answer it just as well, I think. Did the pandemic, Rand, accelerate this trauma epidemic or pandemic that the world is suffering with right now? We're not really out of it. I just got a notification today that Dr. Anthony Fauci has tested positive for COVID.
Yeah, and I saw
So we're
Trudeau
not out
has
of
it again.
Right. So,
Yeah.
but has it
Well,
exacerbated or accelerated the addiction problem?
Well, I think it
And
has for some
vis-a-vis the
people.
trauma?
Some people found that the pandemic allowed them to move away from some patterns that weren't healthy for them. Uh, People who were really focused on not getting what they want, which causes huge stress, um, tended to get worse. And and so I think it was different for everybody in lots of different ways. I know it increased anxiety in lots of people, and lots of people really enjoyed some of the additional freedom that they had by not having to spend, 2 hours a day commuting. And so there's plus and minuses in lots of different ways with that.
Yeah, well, probably for every person who's unfortunately life spun out of control because of circumstances related to the pandemic. I know just as many people whose lives got better for the reasons that you just said. They found healthier habits, they had more family time,
Yeah.
they weren't able to get their hands on their substance of choice. So, yeah, I guess it all depends on the individual. But to go back to Richard Hoffman's comments on the topics you opened the show with on decriminalization of small amounts of illicit substances, he thinks that everything should be decriminalized. Your thoughts on what he had to say moments ago?
And he actually took it a step further, but didn't use the word of legalizing everything and creating controlled markets for them. So decriminalization doesn't mean that you have an automatically safe supply. Uh, Things that are still in that sort of black market category will stay in the black market category. The other thing that we didn't really get into is that safe supply piece. So that is one of the things that happened with legalization of cannabis, and he talked about legalization of alcohol. So, in the 1920s, if you were buying bootleg alcohol, you didn't always know that what you were getting wasn't going to make you blind, because some of the stuff that people made wasn't safe to use. And a similar issue with cannabis. When you were buying cannabis from the black market, you didn't know exactly what you were getting. You might have a pretty good idea, but often you didn't know whether it was an indica or whether it was a sativa or whether it was 20% THC or 30% THC. You just got what you got. Now with legalization, you can go into a shop and get something that's, say, 10% THC, 10% CBD, which is a safer product to use. And if we take that decriminalization piece one step further into legal safe supply, where someone could go into a pharmacy or go into some kind of a distribution outlet and purchase heroin that they knew was of a specific strength or cocaine that was of a specific strength. That would create a sense of safety, and it also takes away some of the stigmatization, and it also takes away that whole sort of criminal element piece of that. I don't think we're close to there yet, but like you said, we've done it with alcohol, which is still killing more people than the opiate problem. We've done it with nicotine, which is still killing more people than alcohol kills. So, we know how to do that, and we know that the things that we have legalized aren't entirely safe. So it's a bit of a political moral decision that has to happen too. Before we
Kara,
forget,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
um, we're taking a break for the summer, people. So uh, we're going to be off for the next 2 months. So if you have any questions, it would be good to ask them now, because you won't remember in 2 months.
We do have some that have come in here. A comment and some questions here. Hang on. I'm getting a flood of them now. I'm so sorry, Rand.
It's okay.
Terry Faluka says the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, and I do love that comment from Lao Tzu, for sure, Chinese philosopher. Marina asks, I'm wondering why there is such a great fear about admitting that there is a problem with addiction in our community and around the world. And I don't know, I don't think anybody has a problem admitting that addiction's a problem around the world. I think we all know that. I would assume she's saying personally, and I don't know, I'm so far down that road of admitting that I'm in recovery, I don't see it or feel it. And when I'm faced with it, it's like, oh, yeah, right. There's still that stigma and people don't want to come out. And I get it. I respect that. That's what makes me wonder, Rand, and why I ask you regularly if we're making any headway in that regard. But why do you think there's still that stigma?
Well, I think people are still trapped in some fear about people that have addiction problems. Like somehow or another, they're not safe to be around, or they're unpredictable. I know we had a huge exhibit of that when we tried to move Pine Lodge into the Calling Lake Center in Fort San, and the neighbors around there were completely upset about the idea of having drug addicts and alcoholics in their neighborhood. And I participated in this in the town hall, and it was disturbing listening to people talk about how horrible it would be to have an addict living next to you in this center, and like sort of wild scenarios about all of the things that were going to happen in the neighborhood because these people were addicts or alcoholics. And so a lot of it is a really poor level of understanding of what that's about. And I think that comes from like historical ignorance and historical judgment about thinking that people who had addiction issues were somehow evil, somehow less than everybody else. And that's carried on in lots of populations. So when Marina asked that question, a lot of the reason that it's still a struggle for some people is because there are a lot of individuals out there who really look down on people that have addiction problems. And like anything, when you're looking down on somebody, in lots of ways, you're trying desperately to make yourself feel better because you don't feel very good about yourself. So you have to look, have to find somebody that you can cast as worse than you are.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. And you just can't really worry or care what other people think. You tell me that all the time. And I actually think I've turned the corner. I've turned more corners than Mario Andretti here, I think. Tara says, I not only wish treatment was more accessible, but that programs had follow-up or life training. As addicts, when we are ready to access help, it's needed now, not 10 weeks from now. Following treatment, I believe a reintegration program would be beneficial. For me, I would suggest 12-step meetings could do that for you. It certainly helped me. But what would be your aftercare, I think, is what she's talking about in the absence of it. How would you address that question?
Well, aftercare is really important because really what you're trying to do as you move into recovery is learn how to manage things differently. So learning how to manage your finances better, learning how to manage stress better, learning how to create some definitive routine in your lifestyle so that you're not scrambling from one thing to another. And I think the term that she used was life skills. And some treatment programs do that. I know Poundmaker treatment program north of Edmonton, that's a big part of their program is developing life skills, teaching people how to cook, teaching people how to go shopping, because sometimes they don't know those things. Depending on kind of where you come from, you may not have ever really had to manage learning how to keep a household together, or learning how to keep yourself together, and that takes practice, and it takes coaching. I think that's why recovery coaches are really, really valuable.
Ayla says, and I know we're running out of time, but she says, is there any way to prevent addiction at the youth level, for example? The number one weapon against addiction is prevention. You can't get addicted if you don't start.
Yeah.
And the fact is, it sounds hard. It's not. I never tried drugs because I was scared. I was scared out of it when I was 9, a presentation at our school. And for that reason, I never started. It's actually possible. Would you not agree? The best weapon against addiction is prevention. Don't start.
Yeah, and the prevention education needs to be at an emotional level. So your example of being frightened by a speaker that you had in your school, that's unusual. That kind of thing is successful, but it worked. But it worked for you. So congratulations. But typically it isn't.
Let's congratulate him.
Yeah. Typically it isn't that successful, but good education programs are consistent. They're not just kind of a once-a-year thing. Regular education about what drugs do, how they impact brain function, how they make you feel, not just when you use them, but afterwards. That they cause depression, that they cause anxiety. And the biggest prevention tool are parents. I really think parents need a better understanding that it isn't useful to say it's okay to a 14 or 15-year-old. It's okay if you smoke a little bit of weed, or it's okay if you drink some alcohol, because it isn't. It impacts brain development. It impacts their ability to not want to do that again because it fixed something for them. But I think we're out of time.
We are, and I appreciate all of the questions that have come in here late. I think we addressed them all. Thank you, Kira, for passing them along. Great job from our producer, as always, Kira, and also the guys in the back, Rolf and Steve. And thank you, Rand. So, yeah, indeed, we will take the summer off and be back in September. Thanks for pulling the rabbit out of the hat. I'm interested to see what other tricks you will have learned by September. I'll see you Friday morning.
Okay.
Rand, thank you for this tonight.
Thanks. Bye-bye.